Now student, in this video we will discuss about sectoral contribution. The sectoral share of output and employment shares shows that all in the three economies, the industry and service sector have less proportion to the workforce but contributed more in terms of output. So here in this video we understand that there are three sectors. Basically, out of the three sectors, industry and service sector have less proportion of workforce. That means less proportion of people are work in industry and services. But these two sectors, industry and service sectors, has more contribution in our GDP and output. So number one, we will start agriculture. In agriculture, there is called primary sector. Agriculture means primary sector. In China, in agriculture, 2003 in agriculture, due to topographic and climatic conditions, the area suitable for cultivation is just 10%. That means in China only 10% land are cultivable, cultivable for agriculture out of the total area. Until the 1980s, more than 80% of the peoples in China were dependent on farming as their sole source of livelihood. That means up to 1980, 80% peoples of China were dependent on agriculture. They were dependent on agriculture. That means mostly their livelihood depend on their agriculture. Since then, the government encouraged people to leave their fields and pursue other activities such as handicrafts, commerce, and transport. So after 1980, government encouraged them to pursue other fields. Government encouraged them to find other field to involve themselves. Okay, that means government encouraged them to shift from agriculture to other sectors like handicrafts, commerce, and transport. As a result, proportion of workforce engaged in agriculture reduced to 54% in 2000. So as a result, what we see in China in 2000, in the year of 2000, we see the proportion of workforce, workforce, that means 54% of workforce are depend on agriculture. That means these 80% now comes to 54% of workforce now depend on agriculture. Why? Because their government helped them to encourage them to build small farms or industries or any other source of any other types of source of income they can generate. Okay, if they tried, then government will help definitely. If they wants to shift from agriculture to other sectors, then government will definitely encourage them, government will definitely help them. And that is why when we comes from 1980 to 2000, we see that the percentage of peoples who are 80% in 1980, whereas in 2000 it comes to 54% of workforce depend on agriculture. And its contribution in GDP now becomes 15%. So in 2000, in the year of 2000, what we see that the contribution of agriculture in GDP is 50%. In both India and Pakistan, the contribution of agriculture to GDP was 23%. So the contribution of India and Pakistan is still near about 23%. Okay, the proportion of workforce engaged in agriculture in India is 60% and 49% of Pakistan. So what we see still now in India, the proportion of workforce, that means 60% of workforce still depend on agriculture in India, and near about 49% of workforce in Pakistan are depend on agriculture. Okay, second we will discuss about industry, that means secondary sector. In 2003, the secondary sector contributed highest to China's GDP at 53%. That means in 2003, what we see in China, we see that the secondary sector contributed 53%. Secondary sector contributed 53% of total GDP. That means out of total GDP, 53% comes from secondary sector. That means from industry. Whereas in India and Pakistan, the contribution of secondary sector is, in India, our secondary sector contribution is 26% of GDP, and Pakistan is 23% respectively. In the normal course of development, China has been shifting their employment and output from agriculture to manufacturing and then to service. That means gradually China developed their countries. They shifted their workforce from their employment and output from agriculture to manufacturing and then to service. That means their workforce now shifted from agriculture to industrial sector and service sectors. Whereas in India and Pakistan, the shifting is taking place directly to the service sector. Whereas what happening to India and Pakistan? We see in India and Pakistan, the shifting of workforce directly the shifting of workforce is from agriculture to service sectors. Whereas in China, the workforce is shifted from agriculture to industry and then services. Whereas in India and Pakistan, we see that the workforce directly shifting to service sectors. The proportion of workforce engaged in manufacturing in India and Pakistan in 2000 was 16% and 18%. So what we see in the year of 2000, the workforce engaged in manufacturing sector in India is 16%, whereas in Pakistan the percentage of peoples engaged in manufacturing sector is 18%, whereas 23% of the population was engaged in China. But in 2000, what we see that in China 27% people are engaged in manufacturing sector. Next, we'll discuss about the service sector, and after that conclusion. Okay, I will discuss it in our next video.